So yeah, Daniel Pink knows his shit. Dramatic pause.
The world feels chaotic and dark right now, and we want to bring a little light. So each week, we'll talk about a book we've read or are reading and our biggest takeaways. Maybe something we've learned, an aha moment, an inspiration, or simply how we've been entertained or encouraged or surprised by the plot. It'll just be a casual, down to earth chat between two book loving best friends. Welcome to the Bookfluencer podcast.
Welcome to the Bookfluencer podcast. We're here for episode 5.
I am Tiffany.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're going to be talking about some books, as always.
I have this like crazy book that I know that I'm going to reread like 3 or 4 times. You may know this from the description, but the book is called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. The title in and of itself should tell you, Mayday, Mayday, do not read. This is going to make you think way hard. You may smell burning from the processing that's happening in your brain. So it was that kind of book.
I'm excited to hear about it because I've seen you post a lot about it. And I think it showed up like directly in a DM from you on Instagram. And I was like, is she trying to tell me that I need to read this book? So I'm excited to hear about it. I'm talking about another fiction book this week, another romance fiction book because gasp, who knew that I could read romance? It's called Love in the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson.
Isn't that the perfect encapsulation of everything a millennial girl wants in one title?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I was talking to my sister about how she drops little references throughout the text that like she referenced Lisa Frank. I was like, that took me back to a period of time that I have not been in a while. So
Totally.
yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I'm excited to give you my compare and contrast of my second romance read, this one being a physical book that I actually consumed versus an audiobook. So
So I guess the question is, what order do we go in? And I feel like it really talks about like how you do life. Do we want to put our vegetables first with the power of regret and then, reward ourselves at the end? Or do we want to save the heavy for last?
I think we eat our veggies first.
Okay. Well, everybody buckle up. So I don't think I was necessarily targeted for the power of regret, but I have read another book by Daniel Pink, which, spoiler alert, was also revolutionary to my life. So he wrote a book called When, the Science of basically timing and your life, and how our bodies are meant to be not necessarily sitting in an office chair for 8 hours a day, and
Yeah.
how to really like maximize your productivity. I, who has never been a morning person in my life, ended up becoming a morning person, realizing that I have all of this like really good thinking time in the morning, and then my squirrel brain in the afternoon is a result of my lack of attention span. So yeah, Daniel Pink knows his shit. Dramatic pause. um so yeah, it's The Power of Regret. Okay. um Important to know is that all of this is based on a survey, both nationally and internationally. So 2 different phases that he refers to differently in the book, like the National Regret Survey or an international poll that he does. So throughout the entire book, you have peppered in different people's regrets, which all seem like, yeah, girl, I get it, Let me just open to a random page and read you some regrets.
All right, here we go.
Oh, female, 82, Pennsylvania. I regret that I wasn't braver and I didn't do more to uphold our democracy.
Oh, wow.
Male, 41, United Kingdom. I regret not being kinder to people. I was too often concerned with being right instead of being kind. Female, 58, Colorado. Not going to see Prince in concert because it was a school night. Tons of school nights versus one Prince. Stupid choice. Amen, girl. So yeah, the fact that he's done the work gives that extra credence to the fact that anything that he's really telling us in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you can sit there and say, I've polled thousands of individuals who have submitted their regrets and they fall into these four categories, you're like, okay, I believe you. If I
Yeah.
was looking at that many people's regrets for an entire, my mental health would take a deep decline. Deep. Let's see. So yeah, he asked individuals to explain their regrets among other things. I love the verbatims. And it really occurred to me, like the verbatims are really just sprinkled throughout. They're on the opposite page of a new chapter. So you know how some people leave that page blank. So it uses the space. It's not a big part of the book, but it gives you enough of a sense to be able to say, I have that regret, or I could have had that regret. There's tons
Mm,
of things I didn't do because it was on a school night, but who cares, you know?
yeah.
So I really liked the universality that really showed. He talks about how everything in life can be a good or bad regret. But he really focuses on how looking backward moves us forward. Obviously, if you stay in this log jam of the regret and you don't have things like self-compassion, which he talks about, or other tools in order to overcome or move past that regret, it could be bad. You could sit and wallow in that for a while.
Mm,
But there are also significant ways in which a regret can help to inform your future decision making if we
yeah.
can welcome it as an avenue for thinking and doing.
Yeah. So I guess it's that balance of like having it enough in your mind to help motivate you to maybe make different choices, but not enough in your mind to like completely derail your emotional and mental well-being because you're dwelling on the past.
Right. And I know for me personally, some of the regrets that I have, it just takes the right development of my own brain or the right, like I call it mental trick to be able to not dwell on it and move forward. To use Brene Brown vernacular, what story do you have to tell yourself about that in order to move past it? Often for me, it is looking at the version of myself that I was in that moment and realizing everything that was happening and, either forgiving myself for having messed something up or seeing the reality of a situation, how all these compounding factors, like what the heck else was I going to do in that moment? I have no, frame
Yeah.
of reference to do anything else.
Yeah.
So he breaks it down into four key areas: foundation, failures of foresight and consciousness, boldness, and the failure to take advantage of a situation.
Lots of failure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that was actually some description. So it's foundation, which is a failure of foresight and consciousness, boldness, which is a failure to take advantage of a situation, and that's often built off of a foundation in order to have a richer life. Moral, which is a failure to make a decision in alignment with your values, and connection, which is failures in relationships.
Mm,
Morals make up the smallest, and connection make up the largest of the submissions to his surveys.
the largest like
Category.
reasons category for regret.
Mm-hmm. I would have thought that morals would make up a larger part, but it seems that once we have our set of values, we just go on into the world and are fairly certain as to what those values are and can make good decisions based off of those values, right?
Yeah.
That's the story I told myself about how that worked out.
Yeah, it is interesting.
But I guess if somebody like whatever their moral code is, you would assume
That's fairly
everybody,
consistent.
well, and everybody feels like their own moral code is the right one.
Good
So
point.
like unless they have some sort of um like identity crisis where they rethink who they are and what they believe and what they value, then they might not be as prone to like in reflecting on their life feel like they've done anything outside of, their moral or not aligned with their moral compass. Does that make sense? My brain is like,
That's what this does to you. You end up talking in circles. I connected with a colleague of mine when he saw that I was reading this and he just wanted to talk about it. I was like, I know there is so much to talk about in this. One of the things that he brought up is this idea of the things that we can't control, the fate aspect of like life. And while we may have some regrets, there are some things that we just can't do anything about, as a result of your circumstances, the life that you were born into. We
mm,
touched a little bit about this when we talked about pain empire. Any one of us at this stage of the opioid epidemic could have become a victim of this opioid epidemic, because it's so crazily big.
yeah,
So yeah, that makes up those, the way that you were brought up and your circumstances in life affect your morals. It affects the foundation um that you have in order to move forward in life. So, yeah, those are interesting aspects of things. And when we talk a lot at this stage of our lives, and at least in this stage of like popular psych culture, you talk about doing the work, putting in the work to um, go back to those foundation and moral and those codes and question the things that you grew up knowing, see if they still work for you, see if they're still serving you. Um, And that's a very scary place to be because you're like, oh my gosh, all of my life I've had this moral value. And it turns out that, at 33, that's not working anymore.
yeah, that's been some of the hardest mental work for me is reevaluating some of the things that I thought were my own morals and values, but as it turns out, they were other people's morals and values that I just adopted. Um, and so like recognizing what's mine and what's others, and then separating myself from other people's and aligning myself with mine. I mean, it's been years in the making and it's still going on, but that's been some of the hardest personal development work for
Yeah.
me.
And so, an example of where a regret could come up is as you're doing this work, you have an interaction, with someone or, a situation where you aren't living in that new version of what your morals and reality are, right? And you regret the fact that you still have these habits from, a previous iteration of yourself. Accepting the fact that, at that point in time, as you're growing, hey, I'm just learning that this is, what is going on. So having that self-compassion to say to yourself, this is what growth looks like, being uncomfortable at how I acted in this situation or what I did or didn't do, is what's going to allow me to be able to change those actions to be in alignment with my values, my new values as I move forward.
Mm.
Brain stuff, man.
I
Brain
know.
stuff.
I'm sort of regretting choosing veggies first this
Oh,
morning.
right, right.
But it's okay. We're getting through it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
We really are. So I mean, basically he ended with like ensuring that regret is productive. Um, it really takes some work, obviously. Uh, that's like the synopsis of everything here, right? Um, but he provides a couple of different areas where you can try and develop skills to get regret to that point where it's actually helping to inform you and not being a drag on your energy. The ones that resonate with me are disclosure. I think that you find that I'm often calling you when I think I'm about to regret something.
Yeah,
We're about to mess this up, Tiffany. Come in.
it has changed from like the thing you did that now you're ruminating on to you haven't done the thing yet and you're like, I'm about to do the thing. I don't know if I should do the thing. So
Come in,
progress.
Tiffany. I'm about to be that bitch. Should I or should I not?
Most oftentimes my answer is yes, I think.
Well, I've gotten to the point where, I know and I've grown into my values. I'm pretty confident in who I am. So by the time it's getting to the point where I'm giving voice to it, I'm pretty certain that that's what's going to happen. And so you're like my team B. You're like hey, you didn't think about this aspect of it,
Like love the initiative. Let's just pause. Let's just press pause for just a second.
Yep.
Get your thoughts together.
The
And then full
other,
steam ahead.
right. Take the attitude down a couple notches, take a few of the fucks out of that text message. Like, go ahead, Jen, do your thing. Compassion is the other one, and I've talked about that a couple of times in this like brief synopsis, so I think I hammered that one home pretty much. And then distance, the distance that you put between yourself and what has happened, you have more of a frame of reference. You learn more about life and the situation and people and how they function, and you're able to say, okay, maybe that person didn't have the capacity to give me what I needed in that moment, or to know or understand about anything beyond their small, tiny little lives. The distance may give you some variables that you didn't have before.
This reminds me, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about like the main technique or strategy I learned from Gabby Bernstein, which I talked about when we did Super Attractor, but I just feel like it's so applicable here, like viewing yourself and situations through a lens of love versus fear and judgment. And so anything can become helpful if you view it through a lens of love. And I think that's aligned with the compassion, right? Like I have enough compassion for myself and for others to view this situation like with love goggles on, right? Like,
yeah,
I love, just how can you assess it with less judgment?
totally. And I think that that distance aspect might come in, like maybe you're not able to see it through a lens of love. Maybe it's too fresh. It's too soon. It's like when you make a joke about a tragedy. Nope, too soon. So, maybe you haven't gotten to the point of love yet. And that doesn't mean you have to love someone who's been an asshole to you. That just means that you have enough love for the world and humanity in general that you don't need to go plan a drone strike for their house.
Well, and for yourself, it's more self-love, because even if it's somebody who's done something to you, you love yourself enough not to dwell in that space and not to allow whatever that person's going through to project onto you or to make you feel insecure or unworthy or angry, right? Like,
yep.
You don't, especially if it's something that's been done to you, like you don't deserve to live your days feeling angry and resentful and like hateful. So even the self-love, just for your own mental health, to be like, I'm viewing this situation with a lens of love for myself, and I'm going to protect myself. And maybe the love for that other person comes later, and with the distance and with the reflection and everything, or if that person's able to, apologize or whatever the situation may be. But yeah, the self-love I feel like is big in both personal regret, but also other people doing things.
I think often when I'm talking to myself in terms of, serving myself, it's that, I don't want to be this person who holds all of this anger inside of me toward anyone. And so maybe that's sort of the connection that I was missing there, in that is a form of like self-love. I care about myself and my well-being and my time on this planet too much to be holding this angry ball, inside me for very long.
Yeah, yeah, anger has been a big one for me over the course of my life because that's the emotion that is feels easiest for me to feel
Yeah.
like in response to different things in life. And it's also so incredibly unhealthy and destructive to my own self, which I didn't learn for a long time. But now that I know it, like if I feel myself getting into that space, it's like, ooh, this is real icky. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
this. This doesn't feel good. Like I gotta get myself out of this little hole I'm falling into.
Yeah. And that might mean getting yourself away from someone, getting your mind into a better place. Like that's when you're like, okay, this isn't worth the discomfort that I'm feeling.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
The ways that I could potentially, regret anything that's going to happen here is just, it's too much. It's like, when you're a teenager and you decide that going to that party, like the risks are just too great. So we're not doing it. Or,
hmm
I use the teen example because it's just a really easy one.
yeah,
At the
yeah.
same time,
Oh,
maybe there's times when you've been spending your entire, what is it? Oh, I forget the movie that's been out recently. And maybe it was like Bookworms, but it had the two girls who didn't party their entire time that they were in high school and they decided to like go do it. Um, you know, Maybe it is deciding to go to the party. It just really depends, on how the regret is working in your life and where your values are in that particular time.
yeah,
Um, in their case, they had the regret of not having taken advantage. They thought that this was the only way to get into an Ivy League school. And then they're confronted with the fact that all of these people that they've looked down upon for doing sports and partying and all of that fun stuff, they still got into good schools. They were able to handle their business and be, who they are. I'm going to find the name of that movie before the end of this podcast so that I can mention it. Um, but yeah, I think that the only area of, so that would be a boldness failure. I'm trying to make sure that we hit all of the
mm,
failures so that we can like, the foundation is a failure of foresight and consciousness. So that's like, okay, I'm not going to put myself in this gross situation because I don't want something to happen that's going to be, whatever. Or looking back and saying, I should have known then what I know now, which gets you into a
hmm
really yucky regret situation, which is where that self-compassion comes in, right?
yeah,
Boldness, that's going to be like, getting out of your comfort zone, going to that date, going to that party. Um, or it could be going, trying on that test, putting it out there that you enjoy study, like being bold against with your friends who aren't having this sort of life that you might want, and standing up for yourself. So comes in all types of flavors and whatnot. We talked about moral and connections. That's gonna, you remember when Craigslist had an area called misconnections?
yeah. I loved that. I loved reading Misconnections.
I loved scrolling through and seeing all of that happens. I actually looked it up for the purposes of this talk and it still exists. So misconnections. If you, made eyes at someone at the laundromat, they may be looking for you over there on Craigslist.
It's still why, like now it seems like such a shady thing, but back in college, I would review it and be like, oh my gosh, this could be the cutest little, maybe I was thinking in a writer brain, like this is the cutest little love story in the making. If only this person knew.
I don't necessarily think you could get yourself in a creepy situation. Don't get me wrong. But like, for example, I sat next to this guy on a plane for a while, didn't get his phone number, didn't get his name even. I had no way of knowing who he was. And I was just like, I wish misconnections on Craigslist was still a thing because this would be the perfect time to post about it.
Yeah, that's true. But then if you're on a plane, which Craigslist do you post it on? Your local one?
I know.
Where, the city where the plane took off, maybe?
I do know that he lived there, or like he lived where I live in Philadelphia area. So I think that I was going to post it there in my plot. I never ended up posting anything, but it felt like something that would work, you know?
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
But yeah, that failure to say, hey, we're both from Philadelphia. Do you want to hang out sometime when we get back there? Or, even just maybe having asked his name rather than not doing that. I may have found it out at some point. I'm just really bad at names. So,
Yeah, there you go. One of Shannon's regrets. When was this?
When we went down to Disney.
Oh, so this is like a fairly fresh one.
Yeah. Single dad who sat next to me, and my mom gave him snacks and I gave him gum. If you're listening to this podcast, write to us. No. Yeah. So I think we all have failures of connection where there was that moment where you're like, I should have done this. I should have, gone tell that person how I feel about them instead of playing it cool. I should have asked for that person's number. I should have made myself known. So I guess it does make sense that connection is the largest area of submissions that Daniel Pink got throughout these surveys.
Yeah.
So yeah, tools, because I don't want to leave everybody on a total, cliffhanger here. Again, disclosure, compassion, distance, talking about the regret with others, having compassion for yourself in that moment, understanding who you are and why you did what you did, and then allowing some distance between it and the time, it and today, whenever it happened. Time heals all wounds and all that fun stuff. And if you're curious about how your brain is working about this subject, go pick up Daniel Pink's book because it's awesome. It's definitely one that'll sit on my shelves and I will reread when I need it, maybe if a regret is replaying in my brain at some point in time.
Yeah.
I like to keep these like tools handy so that I can just grab for them.
For sure. Power of regret. Dang. Thank you for sharing. Although I gotta be honest, I don't know that I'm gonna be picking that one up anytime soon.
Okay. Just call me, be like, Shan, I'm having a regret thing. Can you look it up in that book and let me know what should happen?
Okay, so I read Love in the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson. I think it's described as a rom-com, which sounds about right. There's a very comedic tone throughout.
Cool.
I believe it's her debut. And I will say that it redeemed a little bit of the romance genre for me. So after reading Lunar Love last time and not really resonating too much and kind of like, was it my favorite? This one I liked a lot better. Now, that could be for a bunch of reasons. Could be because I read the actual book and didn't listen on audiobook. Could be because it's about something I'm interested in, which is true crime. Well, it's not about true crime, but true crime is a theme that runs throughout. Could be that I just like the author's voice and style better. So who knows? I'm not ready to say that I'm a romance fan because there are parts of this that I was just like, I don't want this. I don't need this. Like, I'm just going to tell you straight up. This has been on my mind since I was reading, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to say this, but the sex scenes were almost pornographic. Okay. And I didn't really appreciate it. I was like, I feel like I can use my imagination. If you just set the scene a little bit, I can fill in the blanks about what's going on in that bedroom. I don't need the actual play-by-play of what the hands and the mouth are doing. It feels too much for me.
There's an entire area of book talk that just went, girl, you crazy.
I know so many people love it.
I love a good
it's
smut,
something.
But you have to be in the mood for said smut in order for it to really work out for you.
Yeah, I was reading and I was like, holy shit, this is so intense. I was like, I could see how people would enjoy that, like
sure.
It might
nice
get
little
you in the
serotonin
mood.
burst in the brain.
Yeah. But I was like, I feel like I could have gotten the same thing from this that the author wanted me to without some of
A little
these
bit more
details.
Jane Austen, a little less.
Yeah.
E.L. James.
The whole time, all I kept thinking, and let me say, this is by no means a judgment towards the author or towards any author who writes in this way. But the whole time I just kept thinking, I would be so embarrassed if I wrote this and my mom read it. Like, I would just be like fetal position. Please, nobody, like, don't tell me if you read it. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. That's
Yeah.
just my own, that's just who I am as a person.
Don't go
Um,
too far down the romance genre area because you get into books like 50 Shades of Grey and beyond that's like the main facet of it. Whereas with the thing that's differentiating the rom-com from those more the books is that the content, there's a narrative there.
oh yeah. The sex scenes in this book were perfectly timed. They moved the plot forward. Like there was a reason for them. It
Yeah.
was not the main plot or theme. I have read 50 Shades of Grey, by the way, and I was like,
Shook.
I was shook. I did not finish the sequel. I was like, I don't think I can do it.
That's
Um,
fair.
yeah. So anyways, that's my only issue. And again, like you said, I'm sure a lot of folks love it.
Yeah, we're not
I
yucking anybody's yum here. Good for you. This is just Tiffany's experience.
just my experience, I just, made me feel some type of way. I was laying in bed reading like, whoo, okay, all right. This is not what I expected for my fiction read. Just get me to the end. So all that to say, I loved that this story is like, it's such a simple plot. And it was just a reminder that you don't need a whole bunch of fancy, complex twists and turns to make a really good story. Like this, the main character moves to Florida for the summer to um to take care of and fix up the house that her recently deceased father lived in.
Okay.
So like, and her brother lives in the area too. So like that's her task. That's what takes her there.
Something we all can relate to.
Yeah, like she has to get it ready to sell. Um, she's a child of divorce, so she hasn't been there in a while. She didn't have a close relationship with her father. She lived with her mother. And the romance piece comes in with the neighbor who lives across the street.
Mm.
And the interesting layer is that like the through line for this woman, like her, I guess, quest in the story is that she's writing her PhD dissertation
Okay.
on the topic of true crime literature. And so like her personality comes through. She describes her personality as being very prickly.
Oh,
Like she's, always thinking everybody's a serial killer and she's like looking at people with these skeptical eyes and she's distrusting and has spent a lot of time alone because she's been in grad school for 5.5 years working towards this big like accomplishment.
sounds like all millennial women following the pandemic.
I know. I
We get
know.
out of quarantine and what happens next?
But I just love that it's these simple things like she's working on a dissertation. She's fixing up her dad's house. She's reconnecting with her brother, who she hasn't really had a relationship with in a long time. She meets this neighbor guy and like through those interactions is starting to learn things about herself that she either ignored for a long time or it's just now being mirrored back to her because of these new interactions that she's having. So it's like her personal journey to becoming, you know, a new version of herself from beginning to end of the book. But it's just through these like really average everyday, like the scenes, it's like she's going to the library to check out books for her dissertation, or she's like taking in the stray cat that always hangs out by her dad's house, or helping her brother plan his proposal to his longtime girlfriend. Like, not earth-shattering shit.
No.
And the whole time I was reading, I was like, this is so, I was really invested. And I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
invested in this story of this woman who's waking up, cleaning her dad's house, going to the library to check out books, writing a PhD dissertation. Like, slowly starting to hang out with the man who lives across the street who happens to be an elementary school teacher. Like it's the most like
Sounds like the most relatable thing ever.
relatable, ordinary, but I think it's like her development throughout and like how she views herself in relation to other people and sort of how she decides to let other people into her life.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of like regret, towards the end of the book, like she makes a decision to do something that otherwise, like she was experiencing very real regret over something that had happened in the book. And then she chose like boldness to make this decision to sort of counteract. And her thought process in doing so was like, regardless of the outcome, I have to do this. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter if the response is what I want it to be. It doesn't matter if my future is rainbows and butterflies after this. What matters is that I take this action right now because that's what I need to do to feel good about myself and to know that I've done everything I can do, which I also thought was super relatable. I was like, girl, it gave me that like, you know, when you're watching a movie or reading something and you get this like, well, it's almost like a ball of anxiety right in your chest. It's like this very real ache and pain because you're like empathizing so much with the
Yeah.
emotions. I had that while I was finishing this book last night, and I was like, oh, that's so good.
Did
Like
you
that,
understand a little bit more why I sent you that voice message crying after reading a book this weekend? Because you're like, you
yeah,
had a similar thing. You got invested in characters.
I did. I got invested in characters. And I totally, it was such a human experience that this character was having that like I felt like that feeling instantly took me back to moments in my life where I was like, oh, I just remember this ache. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
yep.
Um, so all in all, I give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's a great story. I love all the true crime references throughout because I'm a true crime nerd. I mean, this author though must be a big true crime nerd because like she threw in some references even I didn't know, and I was like, whoa,
Whoa.
you're serious about this shit. But the main character was also writing a dissertation on it, so I guess she had to do some research and make sure it was like a very deep and thorough understanding of the genre.
Wouldn't that be fun homework to give yourself? Like, sorry, I have to throw myself into true crime so I can write this novel. Sounds
For
fun.
real, for real. Yeah, it was a fun read. I read it in like a week and a half.
Woohoo! Look at
Yeah,
you.
I know it's wild. I got to go buy a new book today so that I have something to talk about on our next episode. Like I said, this is holding me accountable to
I love
reading
it.
more.
Do you know how many books you've read so far this year?
Um, Celestial Goddess Rising, Lunar Love, and Love in the Time of Serial Killers. I finished On Writing, but I had started that several months ago, so I don't count that as a
Gotcha.
2023 book.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that
Yeah,
you're getting into it. One of the things I really enjoy about rom-coms is that it helps you to almost romanticize your life as you're living in it. I found myself like finishing up after a hard day and, curling up on my couch, making a really good meal. And I was like, this just feels so luscious and luxurious. And like, I did that. I was like, I romanticized everything about my life and it was awesome. And
yeah,
so that's definitely one of the things that I enjoy about the genre is that there's these just mundane things that can become more significant depending on how you're thinking about it.
absolutely. And it just like it's true that it makes the small, ordinary moments in life feel more meaningful when you read
Mhm.
a book like that. Like she spent a summer cleaning up her dad's hoarder house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Writing a dissertation, but like just through those ordinary moments, like her and her brother stood in the kitchen and shared a cinnamon sugar Pop Tart and talked about whether or not they toast it or not toast it. And he said, I can't believe you eat Pop Tarts untoasted. They're supposed to be toasted. It says it on the box. And she's
Rebel.
like, she talks about how, because she lived with their mom and he lived with their dad after they split. And she talks about how her mom like really regulated the amount of snacks she ate because this character self-describes as being a larger woman. And she loves her body, but growing up, she was like, my
Yeah.
mom
Taught
didn't
not
love
to.
my body. Yeah. And so she's like, I would sneak the Pop-Tarts to my room. So there was no time for toasting them. Otherwise, I would get caught with the
Right.
Pop-Tart. So it was just like, dang, even that one little scene in the kitchen talking about Pop-Tarts is one, I could taste the Pop-Tarts, and two, so relatable about sneaking snacks. And I just love that device of like, you use something as little as a Pop-Tart to examine how these two siblings' lives took completely different paths and how they, you know what I mean? Like it's a Pop Tart, but
Yep.
you gave us so much insight into who they are and how they became who they are
Right.
based on whether or not they toasted their Pop Tart.
And
It's
I'll
like,
level it up and say that she tapped into the audience's nostalgia, knowing who her target demographic was, and that this was a popular snack when we were growing up.
for real. I have such an affinity for, I don't eat them on a regular basis because I looked at the sugar count on those bad boys and it's like, I can't do it. But I have them a couple times a year on my birthday and my half birthday, to be exact.
Beautiful.
And every time I watch Gilmore Girls, and they eat Pop Tarts too, it's such a nostalgic thing.
Yep.
It always makes me want to go get one when I watch a Gilmore Girls episode with Pop Tarts. But
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that you were able to relate to this on so many levels, even just that one scene, as a writer, as someone who grew up during that time, as someone who just appreciates these things. And it's really funny how I think how people talk about how it's the little things or it's the big things. I think that these little things are just like so significant in life.
mm-hmm.
Um, those are the things that you're going to remember later. And whether you're in an ideal situation or not, there are aspects about your circumstances that you're not going to get back again. So being able to appreciate where you're at in life. So the fact that she was back in her dad's house with her brother and had this like chill time, like, yes, you have to clean out a hoarder's house, sure. But when else are you going to get like days with your adult brother in your childhood home?
Yeah, and how she was realizing that like they came from the same like traumatic parental upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
but her brother was just like happy-go-lucky, like positive outlook on life. He'd been with his girlfriend for like 5 years and was about to propose. So like long-term relationship. That his parents' experience clearly hadn't damaged his view of love or how he was choosing to express like his feelings to other people in life. Whereas she kind of internalized a lot of what
Sure.
happened with their parents. Granted, she was the older sibling and they were 7 years apart, so there's that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was cool how the author used the two siblings' experiences and who they'd become in their adult lives to sort of like peek behind the curtain of childhood and upbringing and your emotional development and see like you can have a very similar, you know,
Set of circumstances, but one
yeah,
different variable. And I mean, it could come down to just who you are. I mean, if you have two twins who are put in the same situation, I know when I do some research into trauma for children and whatnot, and there have been some instances where they follow um twins who've been like separated and put into different like foster type situations, or just separated at birth for one reason or another. It's remarkable the things that stay the same and the things that don't. With, I mean, if you're an identical twin, literally all of your molecules are the same, and yet your circumstances are different. Or if you are very similar people and then are put into two different, or yeah, you have the same circumstances and you're two different people. That's the
Mhm.
inverse. Yeah, these slight changes just affect things differently.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it felt like a sort of like a microcosm of our society in our
Yeah.
world, like looking at this one family unit and through this one woman's perspective and her growth, throughout that story. So, anyways,
I
highly
think
recommend.
ultimately this is why book readers are better people, because there's that saying that people who read books live 1,000 lives in one
Mm,
lifetime. And being able to gather all of those experiences from, these windows that we have into other people's lifetimes is pretty cool.
yeah, I mean, you would hope, if nothing else, makes you a more empathetic person, because you're reading about experiences that are likely far different than yours.
Yeah.
Um, Gives you a different perspective. But yeah, for a minute while reading, I contemplated researching grad school, and then I was like, no, 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 that was silly. That was silly. It's just a book. It's just a
Right.
book talking.
It's romantic, but you've already been there, done that. You're good. Um, just going back, the movie is Booksmart. Came out in 2019.
Yeah,
Beanie
yeah, yeah.
Feldstein and Caitlin Dever. Sorry, people, for getting that wrong. Not Bookworm, Booksmart.
I don't remember if I watched that, but I remember wanting to watch it.
You should put it on your docket this weekend if you haven't, because it's pretty awesome.
Do you know if it's streaming anywhere?
Mm,
I can look it up. That's an answer I can find easily on my own. You don't have to do it for
well, I already have it
me.
plugged into Google, so oh, it looks like it might be on Netflix.
Hey.
There you go. Do we have any updates for the people? Do you have any updates from Lunar Love finishing that?
I think I told you once I finished it. Like I actually upped the listening speed to like 1.5 times on Audible towards the end because it was dragging on and I could not wait for it to be over. But I also could not imagine leaving it unfinished because that would feel icky to me. So I pushed through, but it was it wasn't like I didn't get to the end and think like, oh my gosh, that was such a satisfying ending to a book. I'm really glad I read it. It was just kind of like,
Okay.
so
Though they can't all be winners.
yeah.
Or not knock your socks off. Rock your socks off. Good Lord. Okay, cool. Well, then we'll finish it up with our mental health moment. For the next couple weeks, mine is going to be doing uncomfortable things. I have a trip coming up. I think we mentioned that earlier in this. I'm traveling to Vienna and it's going to be awesome, but it is my first European excursion since pre-pandemic. So there's a little bit of anxious nervousness there. And I know it's going to take me being brave to do this really awesome thing that I love to do. So I'm challenging myself to do uncomfortable things in the lead up to that so that I'm more comfortable with the uncomfortable by the time it happens.
That's a really smart strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought I just spewed together a couple of words worth of nonsense and no one else was going to get it. So often this happens when we talk.
I know. No, it's really cool to think like, you're gonna be you like going to Vienna is just gonna be uncomfortable because you're in a completely unfamiliar place. So how can you sort of like
Reduce
what's
the
it?
discomfort. Yeah. I know once I
Yeah.
get there and get my bearings, it's going to be awesome because that's happened every time I've gone to Europe. Um, but the getting there, I'm an anxious person, so I think about
Yeah.
all the things. Um, but I've discovered from doing these, we've talked about this before. I don't know if it was on the podcast though. Cold showers or cold ending to your showers in the morning. If you start pretty cold already, it's really easy to crank it up and stay under there. But like when you jump
Mm-mm.
in, you're like, hell to the no, I want to get out now. So
Mm-mm. I mean, I respect your decisions, but no, thank you. Give me
Not
all the
for
steaming hot
everyone.
water.
Definitely not. I got in this morning. I was like, nah, I ain't doing it. So I took a regular shower and then I cranked it to cold for the ending.
Ooh. Um, well, my mental health moment is I'm part of Gabby Bernstein's Miracle membership, and each week she like releases a new lesson and a new meditation and like a video that goes with it. And last, I think last week's was about spiritual surrender. And there were 3 steps to it that I'm trying to remember. I'm like picturing my journal right now. One was like to take your hands off the wheel, to release time. Um, and the third one might be, I'm gonna get it wrong. Maybe to allow. I'm not sure. But anyways, the first 2 are for sure to take your hands off the wheel and to release time. And so I've kind of had that in the back of my mind as I'm like working towards different goals. Um, that this idea of spiritual surrender. So like let God and the universe control the outcome. Like you've already done the work to have this very real desire and you are taking action towards making it like happen in your life.
Right.
But like you don't need this stronghold on it. Like if I don't do this exactly the right way, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's more like, okay, you've got this, like hold the
Mhm.
vision, but then like release your grip on it
Yeah.
and allow it to unfold the way that it's supposed to unfold. That doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, but
The
like,
surrender word really encapsulates it there. Just surrender to the flow. It's like I picture whenever I think of surrender, the pause that one would get if you were like in a river or something like that. When you're struggling, you're going to sink and you're going to drown. If you can surrender and keep your head above water, then you have a better chance. So there's always going to be that time when if you try to do something else, you're like, in fact, making it worse, or if you're trying to control something too much. So I think there's time for everything where you have to reach that point where you're like, okay, I'm no longer doing any more good. Like, let's just exhale.
exhale. And I think the release the time piece is key for me because I can get it in my head. Like this needs to happen by this time, or I need to accomplish this in this, I don't know, season of my life. And she talks a lot about releasing the outcome. Like time is arbitrary, like
Yep.
you just we I feel like I only do more damage to myself and put pressure on myself when I assign these time frames or parameters that just aren't necessary. So trying to hold the vision, let go of my grip, and then just take, the actions that feel right in the moment to work towards my desires. Spiritual surrender. That is my mental health moment, not so eloquently described.
Please see Gabby Bernstein social media for.
I know.
I love it. Spiritual surrender and doing uncomfortable things. We're kind of on a different trajectory here with our mental health moments, but I love them both for where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, everybody. Well, we will see you on the next episode. I'll be talking about the winners, which is number 3 in the Beartown series, aka what I alluded to earlier when I said I sent Tiffany a sobbing voice
Yeah.
memo on Saturday morning because that's the type of ending that it
Mm.
has without giving away anything.
And my pick is TBD because I haven't read it yet. So we'll both be surprised. I don't even know what it'll be.
Whoop whoop. Catch you next time, people.
Read more books.